Madness. It's just after sunrise in Tokyo. The city is alive. Trains are packed, kids are walking to school, and office towers are just starting to glow with the light of a new day. It feels like any other Tuesday morning. Then, suddenly, every single phone vibrates at once. A deafening, piercing siren cuts through the city's hum. Oh, on every screen, a stark, terrifying message appears. Incoming missile. Seek shelter immediately. Moments later, the world's news channels erupt. A North Korean missile has struck Japanese territory. The news flashes across screens globally, sending waves of shock and fear. Panic explodes in the crowded streets of Tokyo. US military bases across Japan go on immediate lockdown. In South Korea, fighter jets scramble into the sky. In a matter of minutes, the world is plunged into a crisis that could ignite the deadliest conflict Asia has seen in generations. This isn't a scene from a movie. This is the exact scenario that military experts and political analysts lose sleep over. One mistake, one miscalculation, and this nightmare could become our reality. For decades, Japan and North Korea have been locked in a tense, uneasy standoff. Pyongyang routinely test-fires missiles, sending them soaring over Japanese airspace. Each launch is a roll of the dice, inching the entire region closer and closer to disaster. Now, while most of these tests end with the missiles splashing harmlessly into the vast Pacific Ocean, the underlying danger is always the same. What happens if one day a missile doesn't just pass over Japan, but actually hits it? Myth. Whether it's due to a technical malfunction, a navigational error, or a deliberate act of aggression. Even a single North Korean missile striking Japanese soil would change the world in a matter of seconds. Let's be clear, this would be an event of historic proportions. Japan would view it as the first direct military attack on its territory since the end of World War II. The implications would be immediate and severe. The United States, bound by the US-Japan Security Treaty, would be treaty-obligated to defend Japan and would be pulled into a state of immediate military readiness. US forces in the Pacific would be on high alert, and the president would face immense pressure to respond decisively. Meanwhile, just across the water, South Korea would be bracing for the worst, preparing for the very real possibility that they are next on the list. And what about China? As North Korea's most powerful neighbor and traditional ally, Beijing would find itself in an incredibly difficult position, scrambling to prevent a regional conflict from spiraling into a catastrophic global war. Tonight, we are going to break down the terrifying chain reaction that would unfold. Step by step, the moment North Korea crosses that red line. What would Japan's first move be? Would its self-defense forces be authorized to strike back? How would the United States respond? Would it be with sanctions, a blockade, or a direct military strike? And how close would we actually come to a full-scale, all-out war in the Pacific? A war that could potentially involve nuclear weapons. The terrifying reality of a threat that no one wants to face, but one that everyone, everywhere, needs to understand. So, let's dive into the protocol. The second a North Korean missile is detected heading toward Japan, the country's entire defense system would spring into action. The Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAX, along with the Ministry of Defense, would use a network of advanced satellites and ground-based radar to track the missile's trajectory. Aegis-equipped destroyers in the Sea of Japan would be the first line of defense, ready to launch SM-3 interceptors to destroy the missile in space. If that fails, the next layer of defense would be the land-based PAC-3 Patriot missile batteries positioned around major cities and military bases. Their job is to intercept the missile in its final terminal phase. But what if all of that fails? If the missile gets through and detonates on Japanese soil, the response would be swift. the Prime Minister would convene an emergency National Security Council meeting. The first order of business would be to confirm the origin of the attack and assess the damage. Was it a conventional warhead or something far worse? Was it an accident or a deliberate attack? The answers to these questions would dictate everything that follows. Roll a day. Under its constitution, Japan's military options are limited to self-defense. But a direct attack would test the limits of that policy like never before. We could see Japan invoke Article 5 of its security treaty with the US, formally calling on America to come to its aid. This is where things get truly dangerous. The US president would be on a live, secure line with the Japanese Prime Minister and military commanders in the Pacific. The Pentagon would present a range of options. From targeted strikes on North Korean missile launch sites and command centers to a full-scale naval blockade. Every option carries immense risk. A limited strike could provoke a massive retaliation from North Korea against South Korea or US bases, potentially killing tens of thousands in the opening hours of a conflict. A full-scale war could drag in other major powers and lead to unthinkable devastation. The world would hold its breath as these decisions were made in Washington and Tokyo. This is the razor's edge the world walks. Understanding these dynamics is crucial. Imagine this: the moment a North Korean missile strikes Japanese territory. It could be a coastal town, a port, or even just inside its territorial waters. The reaction isn't delayed. It's immediate and explosive. Across multiple prefectures, sirens wail as millions of people scramble for safety, rushing into underground stations and shelter structures, built more for earthquakes than ballistic missiles. In Tokyo, government officials activate Japan's National Crisis Center. Every radar station in the country goes into overdrive, desperately trying to determine the single most important fact: was the warhead conventional or nuclear? Within seconds, US military bases across Japan seal their gates, elevating their alert levels. This isn't treated as a test gone wrong. It's treated as a deliberate act of war. Japan's self-defense forces mobilize with a speed never seen before. In the Sea of Japan, Aegis destroyers raise their missile interception systems to maximum readiness. On land, Patriot missile batteries are rapidly repositioned to shield major cities like Tokyo and Osaka. Above, F-35 and F-15 fighter jets thunder into the sky, creating a defensive perimeter over the nation. For decades, Article 9 of Japan's pacifist constitution has been a subject of careful debate. But in this moment, all that political hesitation vanishes. Japan must defend itself. By half a world away, in Washington, the US triggers its mutual defense treaty with Japan. The Indo-Pacific Command enters crisis mode. American submarines, silent and unseen, reposition themselves near the Korean Peninsula. Surveillance aircraft launch from Guam. Their sole purpose to watch every move North Korea makes. US fighter jets join their Japanese counterparts, securing the airspace over the region. Intelligence agencies work around the clock, racing to answer a critical question. Was this launch intentional or a catastrophic mistake? The US doesn't retaliate immediately, but every action sends a clear, unspoken message. Another attack will be met with a powerful, coordinated response. No country feels the immediate danger more than South Korea. An attack on Japan could easily be a prelude to a strike on Seoul. A megacity just 35 miles from North Korea's massive artillery batteries. The South Korean military elevates its alert level to its highest stage. Fighter jets scramble, and missile defense systems are activated around key cities. In towns along the border, emergency evacuations begin. Military commanders are glued to their screens, monitoring for any sign of more launches or even ground provocations. If a second missile is fired towards South Korea, the situation instantly escalates from a crisis into a major regional war. Across the border, China confronts a nightmare scenario it has desperately tried to avoid. Beijing immediately condemns the attack, sending urgent diplomatic messages to Pyongyang demanding restraint. But China is also playing a double game. The Chinese military mobilizes along the North Korean border, preparing for a flood of refugees. The collapse of the regime, or the possibility of US forces advancing toward their doorstep. China doesn't want North Korean aggression, but it fears a unified, Americanized Korea even more. Thought of US troops on its border terrifies Chinese leadership. The situation hangs on a knife's edge. What happens if North Korea launches another missile? A second strike, regardless of where it lands, would almost certainly force Japan and the United States into action. They would likely launch limited, but decisive military strikes targeting missile sites, radar facilities, and air bases inside North Korea. If South Korea feels threatened, it would almost certainly join these operations. In this hypertense environment, the risk of miscalculation is terrifyingly high. A simple radar error, a misinterpreted satellite image, or even debris from a missile interception falling in the wrong place could trigger a chain reaction that no one can control. It's a domino effect that could spiral into a full-blown war, sparked not by intention, but by a tragic misunderstanding. As this crisis unfolds in East Asia, the entire world feels the shockwaves. Global financial markets nosedive. Airlines frantically reroute flights, creating vast no-fly zones over the Pacific. The price of oil surges on fears of a wider conflict, disrupting global supply chains. The United Nations calls for an emergency Security Council meeting, but the diplomatic words feel hollow against the backdrop of military mobilization. Cyber attacks erupt across the globe, targeting government infrastructure, financial systems, and media outlets, adding another layer of chaos and confusion. Governments issue urgent travel warnings, advising their citizens to leave the region immediately. International companies suspend their operations in Japan and South Korea, and the global economy shudders. Millions of people around the world are glued to their screens, watching live news coverage with a knot in their stomachs. They know that what happens in the next hour, or the next day, could define the future of East Asia, and perhaps the entire world. This isn't just a regional conflict anymore. It's a global crisis, teetering on the brink, where one wrong move could change history forever. What if North Korea actually attacked Japan? This isn't just another news story. It would be a world-changing event, and here's why. For Japan, it would be the first direct strike on its soil since the end of World War II. This single act would shatter decades of peace, thwarting, forcing the nation into a moment it has spent generations preparing for, but always hoped would never come. It would be a profound national trauma. For the United States, it's not a choice. A defense treaty with Japan means an attack on one is an attack on both. The US would be legally obligated to respond, polling the world's most powerful military into a direct confrontation with one of its most unpredictable adversaries. South Korea would be on a knife's edge. Its packed cities, including Seoul, are just a short distance from the border. They would know they could be next, and any escalation could instantly drag the entire Korean Peninsula into a catastrophic war. Then there's China, caught in an incredibly dangerous balancing act. It would have to pressure its neighbor, North Korea, to stand down, while simultaneously trying to prevent American forces from gaining a stronger foothold right on its doorstep. It's a geopolitical nightmare for Beijing. But the biggest danger is the risk of miscalculation. A misunderstood radar signal, an accidental launch, or a retaliatory strike fired too quickly could set off a chain reaction. This could spiral into a conflict far bigger than anything the region has seen in over 70 years. Think about that for a second. Most experts believe North Korea understands these risks. That's why they've always pushed the limits without fully crossing them. Test missiles. They make threats, but they've stopped short of a direct attack on a US ally. The danger, however, is that a single mistake, a technical accident, or a moment of pure desperation could light a fuse that no one can put out. So, the real question isn't just what happens if North Korea attacks Japan. 2. It's whether the world is truly prepared for the fallout, and whether the fragile balance that has kept East Asia at peace can hold for another day. It's a sobering thought, and one that keeps military planners and leaders up at night. Thanks for watching, and if you found this insightful, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into world events.